Thank you for sharing that story, Sarah. That was amazing. When I was preparing for this presentation with my assistant, we were connected on Skype. He's overseas at the moment, and halfway through I hear this thud. And I'm thinking, oh, that's a bit strange. So I keep going for the next few minutes, and then 2 minutes in, I realize there's silence. So I say, Perry, are you there? And I realize he's fallen asleep. So I kind of realized, okay, maybe I don't want to over-engineer this. And one thing which I have learned through my experience and my own journey with WeTeachMe is that I really connected with personal stories and experiences. That's how I remembered the lessons from my mentors and lessons from people that have spoken, that I've attended. So what I said was, rather than over-engineer today, I just really want to come and speak from the heart. So starting from the beginning, I remember when I was about 8 years old, I was in the kitchen with my parents, and my parents were sitting on the table, and I think I was about this high. I came up to them, and then my mum looked at me and said, Kym, I have a very important question for you. At that stage, I was interested in things like Power Rangers and all those little things. And my mum said, Kym, what do you want to be when you grow up? And I looked at her and I said, dolphin trainer. She smacked me, and she said, no, you're going to be a lawyer. So ever since that day, I've always answered to people, I want to be a lawyer when I grow up. And that was kind of like this thing that I accepted by default. And now that I actually just realized speaking about it was actually a little bit abusive, mentally and physically. But, I grew up, I studied really hard. Mum and Dad worked really hard. They were refugees, great people. Came over here, saved up all the money, sent me to the best schools that they could afford. I got into Melbourne University, law school, studied law and commerce, worked really hard there. And then I graduated as a lawyer. I graduated and then worked in a law firm. And I remember thinking at that time, wow, education is so important and so integral to my family that I really want to live up to this and really live and breathe this as much as I can. So one of the things that I wanted to do was learn Spanish. I thought, let's learn another language. I could speak Vietnamese, I could speak Japanese, English, let's learn Spanish, let's learn the fourth language. And so what I did was I went to Google and I said, how do I learn Spanish? Lots of online courses, tutorials, didn't really resonate, didn't really work with me. So then I said, okay, how do I find Spanish tutors? And the top hit said, go to your university message board, look at all the little notices that they have there, and then just pick one up and respond. So that's what I did. I went to Union House at Melbourne University. I looked at all the notices. I found actually 3 or 4 that says, hey, I'm a Spanish tutor, reach out, get in contact, and we'll learn Spanish, we'll speak Spanish, it'll be fantastic. And so I would email them, and they would take weeks to reply. And not only that, I had no way of knowing were they good at teaching Spanish. I had no idea of where they taught, when they taught, how much the cost was. So this back and forth would take weeks and weeks before I could lock in a Spanish teacher. And I remember in a year, I went through about 4 Spanish teachers. I'm not sure if it was my Spanish. I did notice a few patterns. The first pattern was they were more interested in teaching me the romantic stuff and the swear words. So I'm actually really good at that stuff. But before I could really get any traction and learn anything, my Spanish tutor would have to leave the country because of visa issues. Not because of my Spanish, but it happened 3 or 4 times. And I kind of realized, this whole year was a little bit of a waste of time in the sense that I could have dedicated that to learn the language and really immerse myself and soak up as much as I could, but it was really inefficient. So I remember thinking at that time there had to be a better way. And so soon after graduating university, I took a few years off, worked in a few law firms, came out, and then the idea of WeTeachMe came about, which was really, how can we find the best teachers, the best classes, know all the reviews, all the pictures, so you see what your learning environment is like, when they teach, how much the prices are, and be able to book in half a minute or less. And that's essentially how WeTeachMe came about. It's the Australia's go-to place for the best and most popular classes. Anything from Spanish, anything from taxidermy, your more stranger courses, furniture building, furniture restoration, wine appreciation, music, anything you want, we got it. We have over 20,000 classes Australia-wide at the moment, and as of last year, we became the biggest school in Australia. Now, prior to this, let's rewind a little bit. After graduating from university, can I just get a sense of who here is at university at the moment? Okay, all right. So after graduating university, I remember thinking, God, I'm so exhausted. I had worked so hard at high school, did not take a gap year, went to university, worked really hard, partook in as many extracurricular activities I could, and I just needed a break. And so I took a few months off and I went to South America just to spend some time with my friends and decompress and just really evaluate what is it that I'm passionate about and what do I like doing. And I remember at that time when I was over there, I was in the south of Chile. Has anyone been to Chile before here? Yeah. So I was in the south where they have the vacation area, and around 3 o'clock in the afternoon, I was with some friends on the beach, and I got a call. And my friend said, "Hey, I'm in Chile. I'm in the middle, in the lake. Come up and party with us." And I said, "Look, it's going to take, 6 or 7 hours drive? Yeah, why not? Let's do it. Let's do it." So we packed up the car, told my friend's parents that we're going to drive, and they said, "You be careful when you drive. Be very, very careful, because the roads up there to the mountainous regions are dangerous. You're not familiar with the roads. There's potholes everywhere. Just be careful." And we said, "Yeah, that's fine." This was after a day of spending it at the beach in the sun, a little bit exhausted. We got in the car and we left at around 5 o'clock. It was around 12 o'clock, 12:30, midnight. We had made our way up to the mountainous regions. And I remember thinking the roads were really unsealed, low visibility. It was stormy, it was rainy, it was really wet. And I remember sitting at the back thinking, I'm feeling a little bit unsafe here. I'm feeling a little bit like this is dangerous. Maybe I should tell the driver just to slow down a little bit, just in case something happens. Next thing I know, we take a corner a bit too fast, we hit a pothole, and the car goes off the cliff. So in the movies when something bad happens and then everything just kind of slows down and you're hyper aware, you're hyper alert, and you just see everything in slow motion, your brain just speeds up like this. That's literally what happened. I just thought that happened in movies, but it happened in real life. And so I was kind of like freaking out in the back, but also kind of like, this is really cool. Anyway, what happened was, so I was at the back of the car, I was kind of flying. My hand hooked onto the back of the left front seat. I hit the windscreen because it hit a tree. Luckily, the car hit a tree, so it broke the fall. I hit the windscreen, and I heard like a big snap, like a big crack, and then the car twisted around, and I just kind of snapped back into the back of the car. And I kind of blacked out for a little bit. Anyway, I came to the hear sound of people groaning. I'm kind of like, okay. I just watched Kill Bill at that stage. I'm like, okay, I can wiggle my toe. Let's wiggle my foot, that's all right. Let's try hands. And I remember I couldn't wiggle my left arm. And I thought, okay. So I was mentally preparing myself for not seeing my arm attached to me. And I woke up and I remember my arm was just kind of like, I was like this. And it was kind of, I talk about it now, it was kind of cool, but I tried to move it this way and the arm would go that way. And I tried to move it that way and the arm would go that way. Anyway, I'm going to cut a long story short. Made it to the party. Because there was a nurse at the party and she took one look at me. And poor girl, she was holding me down, pressing, and I was yelling at her, abusing her because I was in so much pain. And she said, "You got to get this guy to a hospital." Nearest hospital was in Santiago, 2 hours drive away, and I was in pain the whole way because we got another 4-wheel drive and potholes. Every time we hit a bump, it was just pain, pain, pain. Anyway, so when I was at the hospital, they flew in a team of surgeons from Argentina to operate, and they told me that if I did not operate, I would lose my arm. They wouldn't let me fly back to Australia. So we did the operation, and I had to stay in Chile for another month just to recover, and then I was flown back to Australia. And in Australia, I spent a year and a half just recovering the movement and working with the physio regularly on a weekly basis just to really exercise the muscle and get the strength back. And I remember at the time, in the hospital, they said, "You're going to lose a lot of the movement of your arm." The physio said, "You're going to lose about 20% of your arm movement." And I remember sitting there thinking, no, I'm not. You know what? No, I'm not. So I worked hard, and today I've actually regained the full movement of my arm. But the lesson that I've learned from that is really, no one can really ever really tell you what you can't do except for yourself. And it's quite funny that I share this story because even though that's a personal story to me, I've used the learnings from that in every single thing that I've done, from my business to every single thing that I do now. When someone says to me, "You can't do this, it's a stupid idea, it's silly," I just think, come on. If I can do that, I can do this, right? Now, as part of that, I remember I was working as a lawyer for a while, and I was interviewing at Mallison's, actually, the same law firm, and I went through about 4 or 5 rounds of interviews with the partners. And this was actually when I just booked my trip to Europe. So I was really excited to leave to Europe. They called me back. I said, okay, I'll defer my flights. did the next round of interviews, was about to leave, they called me back again, so I kept deferring my flights, and I ended up paying more in deferring fees than I did for the actual flight itself. Anyway, I did my final interview, went overseas, spent it in Greece with some of my best friends, and when I was over there, they gave me the notification that out of the final 2 candidates, they picked the other one. And I remember feeling, okay, that kind of sucks. But I wasn't as upset as my friends and family were. My friends were like, oh, we're going to go back. It's okay, Kym. We're going to toilet paper the house and the firm. My family my mum was crying a little bit. But I wasn't that upset. And I kind of realized, look, if I'm not that upset, maybe I'm not as passionate about the law. And Sarah mentioned before that she could have been happy working in law, whatever, it's fine. I was kind of similar. I had great cases. Really enjoyed the work, but I wasn't passionate. I wasn't in love with it. It wasn't something which I woke up in the morning and I said, you know what, I can't wait to manage this legal case. So knowing that, I made the decision to go into WeTeachMe full-time. And I remember the time going to have that conversation with my family and my parents. I was so scared. I just felt, I think the overriding emotion for me was guilty. I felt like they had come over all the way from Vietnam as refugees, worked so hard, saved up all their money, sent me to all the schools, anything to do with education, they would pay it without questioning it. And they had so much expectation riding on this, and I was just going to tell them I'm not going to do it anymore. And I remember when I told my mum, she cried a lot. My mum cried a lot. And she still tells people I'm a lawyer. She still does. But you know, what I kind of realized from that experience was that I think my parents were really worried. They just wanted to know that I had a plan. If I wasn't going to do the law, I'm going to do something else that I would be okay. And it wasn't until they saw a bit of traction with WeTeachMe and with my business that they were finally like, yeah, Kym's going to be okay. And they're not so worried about it anymore. So that was managing the expectations of my family in that regard was quite interesting. And what I actually found was, it was a bit of a lonely experience as well, because I guess when you come from, I come from an Asian family, so there's such a high emphasis on study hard, learn hard, and then go get a really good job so that you'll be secure. Trying to flip that around was a really interesting emotional battle for my family. But, you know, on the other side of that, I see how proud my parents are that I've done that. And I have a little sister that's becoming a lawyer, so that's okay. You know, part of the reason which made my decision to go into WeTeachMe full-time was really this idea of being driven by something greater than the money, this idea of being driven something greater than even the context of what I'm working in. It was like, why am I getting up every day? Why do I spend my time working on this idea that learning and education can transform the individual's life, the community's life? This impact is what really drives me. Now, I think about my parents. They came after the World War II. It was essentially a war between the North and the South. My parents are from the South. The North won. And in order to maintain their hold on power, they persecuted and executed anyone from the South that was an intellectual or held a position of power. So if they closed down all the universities, burned all the library books. My father was pulled from university. My mother was pulled from university. My grandfather was the chief of police. He was placed in re-education camp for 5 or 6 years. Their story of escape and survival is incredible. My mum was running down the beach with soldiers shooting at her, jailed 6 or 7 times for trying to escape Vietnam, all the pirates in the sea. So when they came to Australia and they had me, and they always said to me, Kym, you know, in life, you can lose everything. You can lose your car, you can lose your house, you can lose your family members, your closest friends, you can lose everything that you've worked so hard for. This whole security that you feel is just an illusion. But what you cannot lose and what you'll keep with you forever is your education and your learning. And so for that reason, I've always felt that, I've seen how learning has impacted on their lives, how it's impacted on their family lives, and then on the community's life. And so for me, this idea of being able to work on an education startup or technology company where we drive the idea of learning and education and disseminating knowledge across their communities is something which drives me every single day. You know, with WeTeachMe, you know, a lot of people read the press and they're like, oh, this is great success story, whatever. But the highs, all I can say is the highs are so high, but the lows are so low as well. There are days when you wake up and you struggle to drag yourself out of bed. Or you just sit there, and my business partner and my best friend, Demi, she spent the first 3 months every single day crying because she never knew how to cold call or sell. And she would just deal with their rudeness on the phone every single day. But this why and this passion really drove why I wanted to work on WeTeachMe. And it was quite interesting now that I think about it, even though my parents said, education, education, become a lawyer, work in a law firm. I left the law to start a company which actually deals with learning and education. So it's kind of really nice circle of life. That's how I think. So, one of the interesting things about my journey with WeTeachMe is that the amount of doubt that follows you everywhere. When I think about failure, I think, God, there's been so many times when we're on the brink of just not working, when you're wondering, oh, God, do we have enough money in the bank to pay our staff? Before we launched WeTeachMe, we had watched Facebook, the movie, and we realized Mark Zuckerberg had built Facebook in 2 hours. I could do that in 2 weeks. Imagine what I could do in 2 weeks. So we spent a year actually designing and developing the platform. We launched it, and we're like, it's going to be great. I'm going to retire on an island. And no one came to the platform. No one used it at all. And I remember just feeling devastated. 3 months after we launched, I called up one of my mentors, and I said, I was in tears. I said, I don't get it. Mark did it in 2 hours. And then my mentor said to me, you know what? Did you talk to any customers before you built this thing? And I said, nah. I just built something which I thought I would want to use. So he said, you need to go and talk to your customers. So I scrapped the whole platform, went out and interviewed 250 potential customers. And then I realized, I learned from that I had to build a product that people needed that would solve a pain point. So we did that, spent another year building it, designing it, developing it, going through the hard yards again, pulling ourselves out of bed, and we launched it. And then we realized, we need to sell it now. And none of us had selling experience at all. So we had to just kind of Google, how do you sell stuff? How do you sell stuff? Sales strategies. And we literally just picked up the phone and just called people and set up appointments just to gain clients. And I remember that this was a skill set that by all means, we just had to do it. Otherwise we would have failed. You know what I mean? And then fast forward a few years later, we generated over $10 million in sales, but then we realized, oh, fuck, we forgot the business model. We launched the business, but we forgot the business model. So we had to go through the whole process of reevaluating our business again just to make sure things were viable. So this whole idea of failure is, I think, quite interesting for me. For me, that journey was always about what thing do I need to learn next to just move things along. But I look at the lessons that my business partners had to go through, and I just think, oh my God, the emotional trauma. My business partner and best friend, Demi, her partner at the time just did not understand what she was doing. He said, what are you doing? It's going to fail. You're wasting your time. It got to the point where he called her parents overseas and said, your daughter's just wasting your money. And, for me, watching her go through that experience was actually quite interesting because, you face so much doubt yourself when you're going through this. Am I doing the right thing? Am I wasting my time? Am I wasting my family's time? But to also have that come from someone close to you as well was really, really quite interesting. So really, after all of this experience in terms of failure, what I have really learned is that for me, I never really see things as a failure if I learn from it. WeTeachMe could fail tomorrow. WeTeachMe might just not work in a year's time. But at the end of this experience, what I have learned, I think, is invaluable. The people that I've met, people who I call my mentors and my friends now, have been incredible. And I think that at the end of the day, I can always take these skills and go back into the law if I want. The law will always be there. But this opportunity to build a company and build something which I'm incredibly passionate about is really only there, and I have to reach out and grab it. Otherwise, I will regret it for the rest of my life. So last year, we became the largest school in Australia. This year, our goal is to process 1 million students in 2017. And my dream is for WeTeachMe to become the biggest school in the world. Thank you, everyone.